A very good evening and thank you so much for joining us on Uctv Weekend Edition. My name is Nora Sende and today we are going to discuss something to do with the hazardous pesticides. Tonight our topic will dwell on the impact of hazardous chemicals in agriculture on human health, awareness, the risks and sustainable solutions. Now in studio tonight we have two gentlemen from two civil society organizations. Earlier on, in the beginning of the week, we have civil society organizations that came together to advocate for the betterment of agricultural produce without hazardous pesticides. And today, we are here to dwell into this into detail and see exactly what is the way forward in regards to this and what exactly is the impact that this has on our health, on our agriculture, and the multiplier effect this had totally on our economy. Now, I have Bwambale Bernard, he's head of programs at COSENT, and I also have Mr. Lubega Jonathan, the agriculture trade for rural transformation that's at Cientini. You're very welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
How about, Jonathan, you'll start by introducing yourself, a little bit about what you do and what the organization does, and then we'll follow up with Bernard.
Briefly, good evening to our viewers, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. And briefly, Cientini is the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. It is a mouthful, so that's why we say Cientini, Uganda. And as Cientini, we work towards promoting pro-development trade, fiscal and investment-related policies and practices. And here, that's where we look at equitable policies and practices to favor and, cover everyone. Our vision is to create a strong and confident Africa in world trade, because when you talk about world trade, Uganda's exporting commodity. Uganda exports mainly agricultural products. So if we do not talk about agriculture in trade, then we are not really doing a favor to Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Bernard?
Yes, my name is Bernard Bwambale, and I serve at the Global Consumer Center, commonly known as CONSENT. I head the programs there. CONSENT basically does consumer protection work, ensuring that the consumers are well protected and their rights and responsibilities are really well known, and also advocate for these rights for consumers specifically. I also serve with the Food Safety Coalition of Uganda as a coordinator for Uganda, basically a coalition that brings together different actors that are actually dealing with a subject of food safety across the country. So we're talking about over 26 member organizations that are actually advocating for safer food for our people. So these are the two capacities that I serve in this country. Nice to be here with us.
Well, nice to have you too, gentlemen, and I'm so glad you're here today for us to discuss about this topic. Yeah. Now, when we talk about food, there is a whole chain there involved in the food before it actually gets into someone's table, and then later on consumed. But sometimes we lose the foresight, or we just focus on the food on the table itself. Yeah. Now, this food is supposed actually to bring health and naturals and just keep us well and going.
Yeah, sure.
But some of the times we find this food actually being poisonous to us. Now, when it comes to hazardous pesticides, earlier on this very week, on Sunday, we see how voices came out from, you represented the Voices, civil society organization, about hazardous pesticides and how it's affecting the whole chain, Let's just start with you telling us, what do we mean by hazardous pesticides?
Well, thank you so much. So the whole subject of pesticides, you know that currently there are lots of things to do with climate change, and so the production capacity has also lowered. That is what the farmers are saying. And also the scientists are saying, okay, because of climate change, a lot of pests, a lot of diseases. And so the scientists also have come up with solutions. And one of the solutions has actually been pesticides. Mm-hmm. And these pesticides, of course, they present in different ways. Others are insecticides, others are fungicides, whatever. So these are basically made to help farmers overcome the challenge of pests and also the challenge of disease when it comes to plants and animals with an intention of increasing productivity here. Now, the concern has been how safe are the pesticides that we're using? And as a country, the government of Uganda is very much committed to actually ensuring that people have safer food. And one of the commitments that Uganda has actually shown is that we haven't come up with, government of Uganda, I think in 2006, they came up with the Agricultural Chemicals Control Act, meaning that government knew that at one point X, these chemicals will have a challenge to humanity. And so they came up with a Control Act to try to control the pests, rather the pesticides. And according to that act, I want to quote that the definition of pesticides that the act indicates. The act says that a pesticide, I just want to quote it, these are chemicals which by virtue of their poisonous properties are used to kill pests in agriculture and forestry. That is how the government calls it. Now, if we start talking about pesticides as chemicals, as poisonous properties, then it means that somehow we are basically saying that pesticides are poisonous by the mere fact that government describes it this way. Now, away from that, the act comes up with a board, provides for a chemical board, the board that will be regulating these chemicals, the board that is supposed to be guiding ministry on a number of issues relating to these chemicals. So there is a whole board at the Ministry of Agriculture. The ministry has gone ahead to even create a special group of experts, a committee to make sure that they serve the regulation of these pesticides. Now, that same act is also providing for who is supposed to use the pesticides, who is supposed to import them, who is supposed to export them, who is supposed to use them. And the act is very clear that these must be people that are well trained, that have the capacity to do so, etc. Now, you go back to our villages and ask yourself, who is selling the chemicals? Who is using them? Are they meeting the provisions of the act? So we start from there in understanding what this pesticide thing means to Uganda. Away from that, because government recognizes that the pesticides can be a challenge to humanity, the government went ahead to come up with the organic bill, the organic policy. Now, the organic policy is promoting production of food organically, that you can produce food actually without the chemicals. And so they come up with a policy. We have it, 2019. It is there to guide us on how we can produce food without the pesticides. Now, recently, the government is coming up with the agroecology strategy. How do we enable our people to produce food agroecologically? Meaning, you have very minimal usage of pesticides, but the environment is serving itself to make sure it gives us food, both animal and plant, but also the ecosystem is maintained there. So no chemicals or very minimal chemicals. Now, if we have all these, it means that the government of Uganda is highly committed, and they know, or the government knows, that the pesticides can be a challenge. Now, what is worrying is, when you go to the register, the chemical register at the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture has registered, legally registered, 115 active ingredients of pesticides. What that means is that government has particular chemicals that, in their wisdom, they feel that those pesticides can be used by our people. Now, these 115 pesticides, active ingredients, have been repackaged in different brands. So in Uganda, the fully registered, legally registered brands of these pesticides are 669.
Wow.
So we have 115 active ingredients, but branded in 669. Now, these brands are the ones now you guys who have not been so much into the science will see on the market. So you'll be seeing rat, you'll be seeing all of those things on the market. So those are the registered ones. Now, digging down into the registered active ingredients, there are two particular criteria that the scientists use to determine whether this particular ingredient or whether this particular brand is hazardous to people or not. Meaning that if the scientists study these ingredients and they find that these ingredients are not harmful or they are not hazardous, then they can approve them for use. If they find that this chemical or this ingredient is actually hazardous, then they will not allow it to come to the market.
Yes.
Now, what is happening in this country is that, let me quickly take you through the two criteria. One of the criteria is a criteria by Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization, what they call the GMPM, the Joint Meeting on Pesticide Management. It's a criteria, Joint Meeting on Pesticide Management. It's a criteria. Now, this, if you get the 115 active ingredients in Uganda, we have a total of 18 active ingredients which are on the market of Uganda, but according to that criteria, they are labeled as highly hazardous. Not even just hazardous, but highly hazardous. But they are fully registered by the Ministry of Agriculture and NDA, the National Drug Authority. They are fully registered. And these 18, according to FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and also according to the World Health Organization, that categorization I've talked about, they are seen as highly hazardous. Now, Ugandans, I don't know whether it is, I don't know, but we have gotten those 18 and packaged them in now the common brands that you see. Currently, those ones we have 129 brands in Uganda.
The highly hazardous.
According to that GMP.
129 brands.
Out there. Now, that is one category. We got these same chemicals and said, okay, there is another international acceptable criteria that you can also use to tell which chemicals are highly hazardous and which ones are not. That one is called the PAN. PAN is the Pesticide Action Network. Pesticide Action Network.
Bernard, I'm going to come back to you in a little bit,
Yes.
because would really, I think someone out there would really like to know, how can I tell that this is, you know, highly hazardous and all this single detail. I want to grab a little more on what you've talked about as the government's efforts in putting their framework, as in there is something going on. Jonathan, how could you relate the frameworks that government has placed right now that are ongoing in relation to agriculture? Is it enough really? What can be done better?
Yes, thank you so much. I like blending the science, and it's also, it is helping the legal, you know, fraternity, the trade, economics, really understand these things in depth, rather than understanding them blindly. And when you hear the science bit, and also what your question was, and also looking at what you stated, I really want to bring it out on knowledge and understanding of what is dangerous and hazardous vis-a-vis that is known. You know, he has talked about the Agriculture Chemicals Control Act, and that act is really explicit and it is detailed. It has, it really has, it protects, you know, rights and everyone rights in agriculture. But looking at, it has provisions under Section 18 specifically that calls for the ministry to develop regulations. These regulations include, you know, trading, you know, limiting trading, regulations that look at branding and selling, advertisements, because when you look at these pesticides are aggressively marketed. You hear them on radio where these small-scale farmers really can access the information aggressively, and they take opportunity of their limited knowledge. So if we have such a good law, and also we have maybe to to highlight that we are talking about these not because we really want or it is out of the blue, but it is a right. You know, these are human rights. You have the right to adequate food, the right to health. These are protected under the Constitution of Uganda. And
it's very interesting because when you intertwine it with the human rights, someone may not exactly immediately think that actually this is connected to human rights. So elaborate more into details in regards to human rights and how this can lead to a violation of human rights.
When you can understand human rights component when you go to the Mulago Cancer Institute, and you really understand how many people are on the sick bed because of cancer, and they tell you where the cancer came from, and most of them it is because the use of pesticides. Some, because most of them, children are most affected. Actually, we are having more challenges of children now being registered with high rates of cancer disease, cancer specifically. And then even adults, most of them spray without, protective gears. Yet the law asks for the need to have protective gears. It also says those people who spray have to be registered. But now we have to interrogate to what extent are they registered? Has the government registered those people? And this also goes to the local governments. Are the people actually identified at the local government level? Because that's where the people, the farmers are. So that is now the human rights. We have the economic rights under the Constitution as well, where you have to work under a clean and healthy environment, and also the Constitution. We also have the right to health. So if all these, you link them, because the law shouldn't be read in singular form, but you have to go in detail. So when you listen to what the science says and the dangers, then you connect them to the current state. And when you talk about the economics bit, we have lots of counterfeit products on the market, especially these agrochemicals and pesticides. Over 40% are counterfeit. This is not actually rocket science as well. Our viewers can really testify. They have had one or two people who have bought seeds and they do not germinate, who have bought pesticides and they do not, actually they only fuel the growth, and others do not kill everything. So these are things that are out there to the public. So those are all the rights bits.
Right.
So the issue here also goes to those people who use these chemicals. These are the small-scale farmers who face the violation of human rights, who cannot go to the market to buy the expensive products that are well produced, but rather have the capacity to go to the market and buy a tomato that is sprayed, that actually even has the whitish component on the market, because one of the longevity issue that they talk about, also because they are the ones that are on the market for the market people, those people.
Right.
Yes, so those are the people that we really need to look at. If we do not factor them into this specific element, then we shall not achieve. Then also I want to highlight, when you talk about these rights and the right to food, we have almost 20% of the Africa at large facing hunger, and about 58% of the continent is also having food insecurity. And when you link that to we have only 5 years to go to the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. Yet we all have these worrying statistics on people dying, food does not grow, pesticides are counterfeit, people are losing business, and everyone is in business. So it is something that needs to be talked about, and really people understand the dangers and what really root causes are to them.
I want to run with what you've talked about in regards to health, because when we talk about health, it's something that everyone can relate to, really. And in regards to hazardous chemicals or very hazardous chemicals, Bernard, just kindly explain to us how this exposure to these chemicals affects human health, both in the short term and in the long term.
Okay. Thank you so much for that good question. I just wanted to borrow 1 minute from where he's coming from, but also where I stopped. That there is another criteria which is interesting that can give us that question. The Pesticide Action Network indicates that actually the 115 active ingredients I talked about, 55 of them, can you imagine, 55 of the 115 registered fully in this country are considered highly hazardous. Very interesting. And then the brands, we're talking about 459 brands of that category that are highly hazardous. Now, when we say these are highly hazardous, what does it also mean in terms of when you check the statistics of Uganda and study the chemical register of Uganda, it is very surprising that of those 55 active ingredients I'm talking about, 65% of them cannot be used in the EU, where they come from. So they have been made in the EU, sent to us, use them, but they cannot be used there. 65.5% of the 55 active ingredients that meet the PAN criteria for being highly hazardous cannot be used in the EU. Now, if he's talking about human rights, are these human rights of EU different from human rights of Uganda? Is a Ugandan different from the European? That should be a question now we need to ask. If you're talking about human rights, if something is brought by somebody and he cannot consume it, and for you are busy consuming it, and then they tell us that, well, we are going to improve productivity. Now, when you increase the size of a tomato you have produced with those highly hazardous, now when you are trying to export it to the other market because you needed money, then they have a regulation that tomatoes having this limit of this cannot come to the EU. So what does that mean? Buy our produce, our product, use it, produce big tomatoes, and eat them yourself. And then they cause you trouble. Now, what is the challenge with these highly hazardous pesticides?
Right.
The highly hazardous pesticides, according to WHO and FAO, have been divided into different classifications. One of the classifications is what we call mutagenicity. Mutagenicity is a word of science to mean that if I consume the food having a chemical or a pesticide that meets the mutagen compounds, it can mutate, or it can alter, or it can change my DNA. You know what DNA is?
So it is that impactful.
Yes.
That actually you consume food that has chemical and it has the ability to alter your DNA.
Meaning that your genetic makeup, this chemical has the ability to mutate it, to change it, to alter it. Now we're looking at long term. So for you, you'll be taking small bits. Today you eat your thing, tomorrow, the other day, and cumulatively 1 year you are eating, 2 years you're eating. But inside there, the chemical has the ability to change your DNA in the course of the period. Number two, other chemicals that I've just talked about, those highly hazardous I've just been mentioning, they have properties called carcinogenicity. They are carcinogenic. Now, in local language, carcinogenic means that when you eat food containing those compounds, those compounds can actually cause cancer, not leading to cancer, they can cause cancer to a human person. That is what that one means. That when I continually eat the food that is having these chemicals, I am at risk of having cancer sooner or later. That is another property there that we know from WHO and from FAO. Number three, those other chemicals have what we call, some of them have what we call probable carcinogens. Now, those ones, they are similar to what I've just explained, but science has indicated that when they expose those chemicals to animals, the animals got cancer. So they are doing studies on humans to see if they can qualify as carcinogens to humans. But you know very well in science that when we want to test anything, we first test it on animals. Now, if it is already causing cancer to an animal, you are very sure that sooner or later it will be pronounced as a carcinogen to humans. The other aspect has been that most of these chemicals have what we call reproductive toxicity. That when we consume them continually, they affect our reproductive system. Now, reproductive system, this is like a human seed.
Right.
That without that reproductive system, we cannot give birth to children. Or if someone is pregnant and they have exposure to these chemicals, they may have very terrible pregnancy outcomes. So you start giving birth to children and you don't understand how the head is formed and whatever. All of those challenges have been scientifically proven that actually they come along with these chemicals. The other issue that is very challenging is the issue of these other chemicals have been classified to be toxic to bees. You can imagine something which is toxic to bees. Now, go back to elementary science. Bees are our primary pollinators here. That when you plant your beans or cassava or whatever, it is the bees that will come and pollinate them. Now, the chemicals we are spraying all over are highly toxic to the bees. What that means is that the bees are going to start being extinct because of the so much spraying. This is vivid now. You remember in our, about 10 years ago, you would see a swarm of bees living in Zambia and going to, you just wake up and see a swarm of bees. Mm-hmm. Currently, you can take 4 or 5 years when you've never seen a swarm. Where have they gone? Mm-hmm. Somehow, these chemicals have actually led to the toxicity in those bees. Now remember, many of us and our viewers, you guys are consuming honey. But the honey from which bees? Bees that have had exposure to toxicity of chemicals. So there is a whole chain of things. Mm. The other study was showing that actually some of these highly hazardous pesticides, whose list we even have, they actually have, they are toxic to aquatic life. Aquatic life meaning that the animals and whatever in the water. So in situations where you get this chemical and lands into a water source, let us say like Victoria or River Nile, whatever, it will mean that aquatic life there, let us say fish and whatever, they are likely to die. Mm-hmm. Now when they die, this is food to human beings. Many people, consumers, we are not very sensitive. They can die, we even go and fish them and we eat them. And so the process continues. We keep on putting in these things. Lastly, the other classification was that these highly hazardous pesticides are fatal when inhaled, meaning that if a farmer is carrying a pump and is spraying such a chemical, the face is wide open, they will keep on inhaling that chemical. Now, they are telling you that when you inhale it, it is fatal. It can cause death. Now, this is why the human rights people come in. When you spray, your community is affected, because this is a chemical in the air. Everyone is breathing it, and so you are compromising their right, you know. And then you yourself, the farmer, you are inhaling, you are carrying maybe a baby at the back, or a woman is carrying a baby in front. All those are all inhaling the chemical. What about the way farmers are storing them in their households? They have a whole tin of whatever in the house where they are sleeping, even under the bed. And so they keep on inhaling it. Now, they are inhaling it out of ignorance. They do not know. But in the first instance, how did this chemical reach that farmer? It means that their right of living or whatever is being compromised by the person who approved a highly hazardous pesticide to go to them.
Exactly.
So this is how we are tampering with the lives of our people in the name of science, and we are not doing what we are supposed to actually do.
It is very disturbing,
Yes,
actually,
it is.
when you look at it, coming from a scientific view and looking at it that way. It is very disturbing.
Yes, it is.
Eating something that would possibly alter your DNA, give you cancer, give you all these risks. It's very disturbing. And I just can't help but wonder, Jonathan, are there stringent policies or laws that can cater for this? Why are these chemicals a dumping ground in Uganda and then they cannot be used in the EU, and yet this side everyone is turning a blind eye to it? We go to the market and you see coatings, those whitish coatings. You could tell me what chemical that is. Marcozin. Yes. And everyone just seems to be like, this is normal.
Everyone is buying.
Yeah? Everyone is buying, you know. And so it just beats my understanding. Is there something that needs to be, what can be done in terms of the laws, the regulations, and the policies? How much can be changed in this situation?
Yes. It's really amazing. And when you look at the recent statistics, the Pesticide Action Network is saying that EU is banning chemicals in their country, pesticides particularly, but then the export is still going on. And there is also a recent decision whereby court says, I mean, actually the decision was that regardless of the export, first we are not, we are not condemned for allowing export of a product if the other countries really need them. So you see that is now bringing the issue of also double standards. You cannot talk about promoting human rights as the other developed countries per se, but then allow those issues that are going to derail people's rights. So it is a double standards bit. But also when you remember around 2015, Uganda imposed the self-ban. And it came as a result of also Uganda's red pepper being denied access to EU market. And that brought concerns. And Uganda went into a self-ban to really, I understand, and you know, to understand the problem and the issue and how to come out, I mean, to address the issue. This is 2015
Yes.
that we're talking about. We are in now 2025, where if you had a self-ban and you do not have, you have a law that asks for the regulations, and then right now, it's so long that we do not have even the regulations from 2015. So we have also those fears that even next time, these bans are still coming up. And the EU even comes up to sends a reminder call that you guys, we banned these products. And actually, even right now, EU is still in the journey of banning those dangerous pesticides. For example, it is banning mancozeb. The EU Commission is also tabling different deadly products to be, you know, stopped, to be brought into their market. So it also implies that not only the healthy issue, but also the trade relations are going to be, you know, a factor. But when we should really understand the perspective of policies and laws, we have an issue of conflict. Yeah, we have conflict of laws and policies and interests per se, because the interests are in investments, interests are in trading, interests are in poverty eradication, and then there are interests of protecting people's lives, livelihoods. So if you are showing interest as a government that we are now developed the National Organic Agriculture Policy, and you also in the policy you specifically highlight how Uganda's competing interest in in competing with the global market on having good and healthy food on the market and how it is on demand. You acknowledge that. And then you also come up to show interest of pursuing or developing the national organic, the agroecology strategy, which is actually on the process of getting completed. But we still remain with laws that are open. Yes. They are open to allowing dangerous chemicals. The advertisements are very rigorous every day, every time. These people have lots of money. These are multinational companies where they have all monies to create awareness for the illiterate people. Because people, they have good narratives, that a narrative that will tell you that you don't need even to use a hoe. We only need to spray. So these are chemicals. But then we have the law that has that, limitation. And we don't have regulations still now. So it is something that needs to be really addressed. And we have the mushrooming, trading shops. When you look at, in fact, when you highlight the issue of trading in agrochemicals, when you go to Kampala, every day there are mushrooming shops, because they are making profits, because they are sales. So, and there is no regulation for those shops. They are counterfeit. Over 40% are counterfeit. So these are issues that are enough for the government to show, let us prioritize our interests. The government should prioritize the interests of the people, because, I really like this principle. There is a principle in law which says you have to protect. Actually, it is an environmental principle that says you have to protect for the present. And it also goes ahead to go for the present and the future generation. So if we are looking at the present, let us maximize production with healthy, standards and practices, and then we protect the soils, we protect the livelihoods of the future generations by preserving what they eat and also preserving what their production mechanisms are. So by that, and uplifting the principles. Let us go by principles.
Yes.
Let us, I don't want to use this. Let us regulate the dangerous chemicals. Let us ban the highly hazardous pesticides that have been identified. Let us not have a dead country.
Exactly.
Yes.
We do want food, but we also want good food that is healthy, will make us healthy and not poison our systems.
Okay.
Now, Bernard, there is a narrative that is going on that, agriculture nowadays cannot make it without actually pesticides, which is, debatable really.
Yeah, it is.
And you've talked about, one of you talked about as one of the most vulnerable groups to these hazardous pesticides, the women, the children, and the elderly.
Yeah, sure.
We see so much that our agriculture sector is actually sustained by smallholder farmers, of which we see actually, when it comes to farming, we see the female gender more involved.
Yeah, sure.
Now that just tells you how
Vulnerable. Really.
yes, how vulnerable it is, how vulnerable that group is. And so how can we really advocate for safer agricultural practices in our communities so that, we make the food safer and the whole value chain, safe for those in practice?
You see, one of the most interesting things is people have made sure that the people who are most affected do not get the information that is supposed to protect them.
Right.
That is one mess. So we've made sure that whoever has come up with highly hazardous pesticides, they have a very good language of advertising. Okay, this one you don't need to hustle in the garden, you just pour it and the grass goes away. With my vivid eyes and the researches we've been doing, I have seen women getting glyphosate, which is a herbicide, trying to dry the grasses or whatever. I have seen those same women get that same glyphosate and pour it on maize to dry it. And then the woman says, no, but the other time I put this chemical, I poured it on the grass and the grass dried. So if you can dry the grass, then you can dry the maize. I have seen them get that Roundup, what you're calling Roundup, so these guys call it glyphosate. They spray it on the maize to dry. Now, why is this farmer spraying a herbicide on food, yet she's going to eat it? Her children will find it in the school as posho. I mean, where does this come from? Because we have given people false hope that, you see, if you use this chemical, it will dry this. And that is the only message they have. We've not gone ahead to break the science and tell them, hey, this should be used this. Currently, you see all the tomatoes around Kampala, you'll see white on it.
Right.
Now, the instruction for use could be that this tomato should be sprayed with this chemical 14 days before the harvest. You get it? Instruction for use. Now, the market vendor goes and buys the tomatoes from a farmer, puts them in the market, let us say maybe Kalero or whatever, puts them there, and gets a basin and puts this chemical and then passes the tomatoes in that chemical. Now, all our inspectors, they know that those tomatoes have that, and they keep passing around, collect their tax and move on. But who doesn't know that? So it is just making sure that our communities remain ignorant so that we keep sucking them and we forget that all of us are dying. By the way, if a vendor in the market has Macozeb on the tomato, they will die before the consumer who is buying it. You know why? Mix your chemical here, put your tomato, so you have your tomatoes on the stall with the Macozeb. So you keep selling to us, keep selling to us. And the guy comes with a chapati, and you grab it and you start eating before even the consumer who bought your tomatoes reaches home. You've already eaten the chemical. How many of them wash their hands, for instance, that, hey, I'm from selling, then he first washes. But this is a tomato with a chemical. So I think for me, it has been an issue of ensuring that our people remain in the ignorance of things. Making sure that we harden science, and it looks like rocket science, and yet our people can know this. Our farmers, I kept on showing my colleagues, farmers go and plant vegetables because nutritionists are saying, let us eat more vegetables. So there's a lot of market for vegetables. A farmer plants vegetables along the river or the stream and keeps on spraying them. Now, you will not tell me that the chemical will say, no, me, I'm not for water, me, I remain on the vegetables. Certainly it will go there. But why are farmers doing it? They are not informed. They do not know the repercussions of using these things. They don't know the danger of each of them. They even don't know how to use the chemical. You'll find them, they tell you, okay, mix 200 grams in 4 jerrycans of water. She says, no, that will not work. Actually, the more I put, the better. So, person gets 1 jerrycan and puts 500 grams. So, farmers do not know how to use these chemicals. They do not know the dangers of these chemicals. They do not know how to protect themselves when they are using these chemicals. They do not know which chemical is hazardous and which one is not, because they know, after all, the chemical is at the doorstep, government has approved it. So I think that the magic these guys have used is to make sure that the consumer, that the farmer, and everybody in the food system does not understand these things. So I will call upon us, academia, civil society, the media, everybody, let us come on board. We support government to do its role of awareness creation, create awareness to the people. But I want to call also government to actually ban highly hazardous. Because when we don't ban them, they'll keep coming. And when they keep coming, you will not blame my mother for buying it, because you have made it available to her. So we need to ban highly hazardous pesticides. We need now to promote agroecology. We need now to look at alternatives. What is the alternative that a farmer can actually use? For instance, Sukuma and Kulika Uganda, these are organizations here. They have these alternatives. Pheromone traps, that when you put this pheromone trap, which is like a glue, you just put it in the garden, all the insects will come and fall there, and so they cannot fly. These solutions are here with us in Uganda. Now the question is, how do we support those guys, these scientists who are coming up with alternatives, to promote them and help them actually to produce more and scale them up? How do we ensure that agroecology works? Because it worked in our days. Those days, I don't remember any chemical in our home. I don't. Because you throw a bean there, it will come up. You throw maize there, it will come up.
Right.
You throw this there, it will come up. What has happened is that now, science, if I have a fertilizer, these soil scientists are claiming that has lost nutrients. Where have the nutrients gone? The science here is, if I have a fertilizer and I provide it in the soil, I am basically telling the plant that, hey, there is food nearby. So it doesn't need to have roots deeply to go and pick the what? The nutrients. That is what the fertilizer actually does. In common science, we know that when a garden X has been used for planting maize or whatever, after season, leave it into a bush, what they used to call farrowing. The next season it will produce food that you cannot expect, because we have killed living organisms in the soil that used to help us to actually open up the soil, used to decompose things down there. Now there is nothing. Every time you pour this chemical on the whatever, you are burning grass. It will not only burn grass, it also burns whatever living organisms were supporting the soil. That is why in the olden days you would see worms. Once it has rained, the worms come out. Currently, you can take a year or so when you have never seen a worm. Where have the worms gone? These chemicals could be dangerous to the soil. And so we are standing a risk that in the next few years, you don't have soil to plant anything. Remember that if, for instance, you do GMOs, these GMOs have to come with a pack. You make your strain which is resistant to something. Then you have to make it a chemical to protect it. Then you have to make a fertilizer to make it grow. Then you have to make... So at the end of the day, production of food has become too expensive for the farmer. But what are the returns? That is why currently agriculture is no longer leading in the GDP contribution to the country. Because everything is now messed. People spend a lot of money producing and get less. Now, when they get little from the production, where does the money go? Does it go into development, or it goes into treatment of people? So many times the farmers are hustling with chemicals, but by the time the season ends, they are already sick. So they get all the money they have earned from hard sweat. They bring it to the hospital and we treat them. Of course, for us, we will keep treating you guys. When you come, we shall treat you. But what are we treating? We are treating the disease that you've gotten from misuse of chemicals. Remember, the person who gave you the chemical is similarly the same person giving you the medicine. So there are two industries that will have to thrive at the same time. The pharmacology, we shall keep producing medicines, but also the pesticides. So use your pesticides, fall sick, come and we give you the medicine. So all of the money that you are working all the season is spent in treating yourself, your children, of the diseases that actually we can prevent by just a mere ban of highly hazardous pesticides. So how can government tell us productive communities? Where will you get communities which are productive when whatever they are producing, one, is killing us as a food. Yet food is supposed to be something that gives us health. The money we are earning from this, wherever we want to go to the money economy, very fine. But are we reaching the money economy? Because money economy would mean I earn the money, use it for development, I develop myself, I educate my children and all this. But all the money that comes, medical bills. By the way, it even goes beyond just paying medical bills. Some people even have to sell the land so that they can be taken to China or India for medication. But what is killing us? These things. So we cannot stop really talking about this. So I think we need to get alternatives. Agroecology is one way to go. Number 2, organic agriculture is another. We have all these things here. We can promote them and scale them. Number 3, we can talk about integrated pest management. These are all practices that we have around. Let us sensitize our people. Let us train our people. Let us love this country. Patriotism as a country. And I think with those, we can be able to move really.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I would also like to hear what Jonathan has to add on that. The recommendations and the way forward in regards to making sure that we have cleaner agriculture practices.
For me, I think as an institution, Siatini, we advocate for increased budget allocation to the agro-industrialization program and the supporting program, for example, private sector development program, so that we enhance people's capacity and inclusion into the business. Because you cannot tell someone to exporting organic products itself, it is extremely hard and expensive and next to impossible for a small scale farmer. But if credit is accessible to the farmers, also we have the insurance subsidy in place, but then we need to increase the budget to that, to those 2 programs, and also the general programs such that we have those elements captured. Also, looking at the research and innovation, we have issues of, scientists have the soil, manipulation. And can we go to do Afrocentric research, something like Africa, not research that is imposed on us by the multinational corporations. Let the government, because he who pays the piper calls it. Yeah. So the issue is we need to deliberately inject resources such that we can have research that is Ugandan based, and also we need to we are alive to the issue of land not expanding. So let us maybe help the small scale farmers through the available resources to have irrigation schemes. So changes in climate is coming up. How can we help farmers to grow crops like all year round using their technologies? So these are things that we really want to highlight. And maybe lastly, but not least, it is we have concluded the negotiations by the African heads of state, and yesterday, and that is the CADAP, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. It is our time to shine as Uganda. It is our time. In fact, the report that has to come up next should show Uganda's tremendous, progress, because it is the Kampala Declaration, So it is our time to show that we have allocated resources, we have increased the extension services, we have enhanced trade, we have been involved in the African Continental Free Trade Area processes. So let us be the shining star on the African continent to do with agriculture and productivity.
Very nice. Yes. The shining star on the African continent to do with agriculture and productivity. That is actually a very good goal. And I hope that all these things shall really be put into consideration. Bernard, I don't know if you have your final remarks before we can actually close off, but we would like to hear final remarks in regards to this.
Yeah, I think my call has really been clear out there to the government, to the consumers and all this. But I think I'll say that it's really a burden that we are handling. This issue of pesticides, and especially the highly hazardous ones, we are risking to kill humanity. And so all of us, we need to be responsible. The consumers, still, I'll call upon us who consume the food. When you go to the market and see tomatoes with the chemical, please run away from it. Otherwise, you're killing yourself when you're seeing, because you've seen it. So I think consumers will also have a hand to do, a brother to play. We also need, as consumers, to advocate for our rights. I think we need to empower communities to also join this campaign and advocate for themselves, so that a bigger coalition, a mass of all of us coming into play to make sure that we have safe, nutritious and adequate food. And I think also the researchers have to come in here, give us local research, as he says, local research. What can we do as Ugandans, and make sure that our continent, our country, our people are having productive lives. So I think that is basically the calling, and we shall keep on sensitizing the masses on this subject. And government, I know, they will have to hear this voice. And
we also have the tissue culture issues, you know, tissue culture, and, you know, let us develop those that do not call for hybrid and what.
Oh, yes.
We can do a lot, yeah, sure. So I think for me that is the call that we are making today, and all our recommendations, I know that they can actually deliberate this country. It is actually another war, I would say. I would call it, is it third world war? It will attack us on food. Thank you so much, our dear viewers, for listening to us.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Thank you so much, Jonathan. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and thank you so much for joining us on the weekend edition as we discuss the issues to do with hazardous pesticides. It is a silent killer, but it's something that actually can be dealt with. Both you and I, if we put our hands together, we can actually fight for our rights to healthy food, fight for our rights to good health, and just let us wage a war against harmful pesticides.
Sure.
It begins with you and I, because the final consumer also determines what happens. Until next time, I'll see you soon. For now, do have yourself a lovely week ahead. I am Nora Sende.